Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. It is a different sort of video today. Today we're going to be doing Formula 1 2023 predictions. We're going to be predicting the drivers' standings, then we're going to do the constructors as well. And of the 3 days of testing, I've watched a couple hours here and there. I kind of have an idea on where teams are currently, but obviously it's a 23 race season calendar. A lot can change. Last season, Ferrari get that 1-2 in Bahrain, then they almost finished third in the constructors, for example. So a lot can change. These are just my predictions, so don't go mad at me. We're going to start right at the very bottom, and it's going to be the rookie into Formula 1 for Williams, Logan Sargeant. Now, testing Williams, they look closer. It looks like they've closed the gap, but unfortunately, I still think they're going to be rock bottom. I still think they're going to be at the back. They're going to hit points here and there, but as a rookie, I think it's going to be really difficult for Sargeant to get many points, if any at all. Do I think he'll do better than Latifi? Yes. Is that saying something? Not really. Latifi was not good at all. But Logan Sargeant, P20. I don't know an awful lot about him, to be fair, because I didn't really watch F2. So maybe he comes out, surprises me, but I do not see him beating Alex Albon, and I see Williams as the slowest car on the grid. Next up, Nyck de Vries in P19. Many people might still be on that hype train of Monza, but unfortunately, I don't see him doing that well this season. I think he's going to have a poor season. Plus, I think that AlphaTauri's still going to be stinky. You know, their livery, a lot of people hated it. It kind of grew on me when I was watching it in testing. But we're not here to talk about the livery. We're talking about where they're going to finish. And Nyck de Vries, for me, I think he might get a couple points here and there. I don't see him doing too well. So I've got him down in P19. I think Tsunoda's going to win that teammate battle. But I think it'll be kind of close. And if de Vries does beat Tsunoda, I'm not going to be awfully surprised. But it's his first full season in Formula 1. It's just rookies. It's very hard to beat your teammate in your first full season. So that's Nyck de Vries in P19. P18, we've got Alexander Albon, and I rate Albon. He's a class driver, but once again, the Williams just isn't fast enough. So he's going to be down in P18. I think we're going to see a lot of AlphaTauri and Williams battles. Williams, I think they've closed that gap. I think they're going to have a bit more in them. They're going to get a few more points, but I still think they'll be at the very bottom. So Alex Albon, P18, not much more to say other than he's just not in a very good car. In P17, we have Yuki Tsunoda. I think Yuki Tsunoda is a good driver. On his day, he is class, but he's just not consistent enough for me. But I think he'll pick up some good points here and there. I think he'll outscore de Vries as well. I just don't think that AlphaTauri is going to be fast enough to pick up enough points this season to get him up the ladder. You could be looking only at a few points for AlphaTauri, and the car just doesn't seem that good. So it's P17 for Tsunoda. Although I do rate him pretty highly, he just doesn't have the car underneath him. Next up in my rankings is Guan Yu Zhou. Now, yes, he didn't have the greatest season points-wise last season. It was a bit of a slow start, and he eventually got it going. But by the time he got it going, that Alfa Romeo was down back right into the midfield, or at the lower end of the midfield, so he wasn't able to get the points. And he did look decent last year. So it might come as a surprise that he's down in P16 in my driver's standings, but I don't think he's on the level of Valtteri Bottas. And although Bottas might, he might be not caring as much because he's in a midfield car. You go from Mercedes to an Alfa Romeo, you're like, well, I have nothing to prove now. But I think Bottas is still going to wipe the water with him. I think Zhou will do decent, but I don't think he'll do incredible. And that's why I've got him down in P16. I think that Alfa Romeo is going to be in the midfield. And if your car's in the midfield, you've got to be a class driver to get it into the points consistently. I see Bottas doing it, not so much Guan Yu Zhou. So that's why he is P16 in my standards. Next up is going to be Mr. Black and Orange Flag himself, Kevin Magnussen. Last year, Haas made a huge step forward from the 2021 season, and they were actually fighting for points on a consistent basis. I mean, they started off the season as fighting Mercedes. So you go from there and you're like, whoa, after being 2 seconds from the back of the grid. But last season, it was, I got to say, it was a disappointment for Haas. I think they finished 8th in the end. You finish 8th after your finished 5th in Bahrain. The development slowed down. Obviously, they can't develop as much. They couldn't reach the cost cap. They don't have the same facilities as any of the bigger teams. But I think it's still a very disappointing season for Haas. They lost a lot of points from stupid first lap battles, such as Magnussen trying to battle Hamilton in Spain. You're not going to battle Hamilton for the rest of the race. Just take it easy. Get home, take P7, P8, whatever you need. Take some points back. But I think that aggressive nature from Magnussen, he's always had that. And I think that might cost him a little bit this season. And that's why I have him finishing behind Nico Hulkenberg. So Kevin Magnussen P15 and leading into Nico Hulkenberg. I think Nico Hulkenberg is going to finish P14, one place ahead of Magnussen. Both these drivers, solid drivers. I see Hulkenberg just edging it, but I think it'll be a very close battle between the pair of them. Hulkenberg coming in for Mick Schumacher. I think it's a good choice from Haas, personally. I'm gutted for Mick. You know, I think he has potential to be a solid driver in the future. If I was Haas, probably would have done the same thing. Hulkenberg, he's a reliable driver. Yeah, he has that podium record hanging over his head, but he's a consistent point scorer. The consistency is what Haas need, especially when their car is good, because it's not going to be good for all 23 races. When it's good, they need the points. I think Hulkenberg will deliver. So now P13, and this choice completely changed after testing because of how the McLaren was performing. So I've gone with Oscar Piastri for P13. McLaren, I think they've bottled it. Watching pre-season testing, I think they're going to be one of the slowest out of the blocks in Bahrain. I think they're going to be the 8th fastest car, maybe 7th fastest car in Bahrain, and probably won't score any points. Maybe Lando Norris could get a couple points. They look bad. They look really bad. I think what's going to save them this season is the development. They're going to develop fast, a lot faster than the teams around them, and they'll be able to get some points back and claw their way up. But I think Oscar Piastri is going to be P13 in the championship, and it's his rookie year. He's a class driver from what everybody's been saying. I personally can't say it myself because I haven't watched F2, F3, F4. But looking at the results, you know, he won F4 in his first year, F3 and F2 all in his first year, I believe. So for drivers doing that, they definitely deserve to be in Formula 1, let's put it that way. But I think he's going to be P13 just on the basis it's his rookie year. You know, you've got to get into the car, get used to it, and you're up against Lando Norris, who is a world-class driver, future world champion for me. And if that McLaren car isn't any good at the start of the year, I don't see Oscar scoring too many points, especially in that first half of the year. So they've got to get that developed going from McLaren. So that's why I've got Piastri in P13. In P12, we have Guan Yu Zhou's teammate in the other Alfa Romeo, Valtteri Bottas. There's a few spots between the two of them, but I think Bottas is going to get the most out of that car when it's good, because that midfield battle is going to be close. And I believe Bottas, he's going to put in some of those stellar qualifying performances. He's very good in qualifying, and I think that's going to help him get those extra points for Alfa Romeo when they need it, and that's why I've got him up in a P12. I rate Bottas highly. I think he's a really good driver. I think he's going to get the points for Alfa Romeo, and I've got him finishing P12. In P11, I have gone for Pierre Gasly. Gasly just recently moved to Alpine from AlphaTauri, so he's finally got out of that Red Bull program, and I think he's going to finish in the bottom half of the standings in P11. He's going up against Esteban Ocon, who is a very solid driver, very consistent. I don't think he's going to be able to keep up the pace. You know, you join a new team, it's new surroundings. You're up against Ocon, who apparently they've had beef it with in the past. So maybe he's feeling that pressure as well. He might not feel so homely. It might be difficult to get up to speeds. I've got Gasly in P11. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. But I think Ocon's going to outperform him a little bit better. The Alpine looked okay in testing. You can't really tell because it's just, you know, you're just in one track in Bahrain, but you can get a good gauge of where they're at. And I think they're going to be right in the thick of the midfield. So I've got Pierre Gasly in P11. A team that I haven't spoke about yet is Aston Martin. And for P10, I've gone with Lance Stroll. I think Stroll is a decent driver. If he didn't have his dad supporting him, would he still be on the Formula 1 grid? Potentially. I think he's good enough to be on in a Formula 1 seat, even without his dad's money. But I've gone with him in P10. The reason for this, Aston Martin looked really strong. But one problem that I had was over testing. He couldn't compete in testing because of his wrist. So I think he's done something to his wrist. I'm not sure if he's fully broken it. I didn't actually research that. But if he has broke his wrist, he should be out for next week Bahrain. could be out for the first couple races, and that's points that they're potentially losing. And Aston Martin in testing look fast, so they're going to be really fast at the start of the year. That's when they're going to want to get the most points before other teams can close that gap. So if he misses out on the first couple races, that could be costly for Lance Stroll. Plus, he has to adapt to the car. He's missed out on 3 full days of testing. So Lance Stroll, I've got him in P10. I think he could do better, but with that broken wrist, I think P10 is going to be around where he finishes. Next up, we have Lando Norris. He was the best of the rest last season, and the only driver outside the top 3 teams to actually get a podium in a 23 race calendar, which is kind of crazy, a little bit disappointing, kind of ruined Formula 1 a little bit. You know, we like to see midfield cars getting on the podium on occasions, maybe a potential race win just to mix it up. But the gap between the front 3 is too large. And I think we're going to see it again this season. But Lando Norris P9, and I think he's going to push that McLaren to places it shouldn't be at times. I don't think he's going to get a podium. I don't see that McLaren getting anywhere near a podium this season by the looks of it in testing. But I think he's going to beat Oscar Piastri. Do I think he's going to... I mean... I think Oscar, towards the end of the season, it'll be closer, but I think Lando's going to have Oscar's number this season. So I've got Lando Norris P9. Is he going to move? I think Lando Norris is going to have to move at some point, because that McLaren is going backwards. And if they keep going backwards, he's going to become more and more unhappy, and I can see him moving. But Lando Norris, P9 for the season is my prediction. In P8, we have Esteban Ocon. Esteban Ocon, I mentioned it earlier. I think he's going to beat Pierre Gasly. He's comfortable in that Alpine surroundings. He's very fast, very consistent. And I mean, last year, he beat Fernando Alonso, remember? Yes, I know all of you are saying Fernando Alonso, his engine blew up throughout the season. Yeah, sorry. Alonso had a lot of bad luck. But you can't deny the fact he did beat him on points. And even though Alonso had to DNF multiple races because of it, to still beat Alonso over the course of a season and to beat him on races here and there and show that you have the pace, you've got to be a solid driver. That's a 2-time world champion he has beat right there. So I think Ocon is going to have another solid season. He's going to be P8, and that means that best of the rest for me will be his ex-teammate Fernando Alonso. That Aston Martin looks fast in testing, or at least for the midfield cars, it looks fast. And I could see him finishing P7 in the standings. I could see him potentially pushing those front 3 teams as well. You know, you get a wet qualifier and you get a wet race, you get a mixed race. He would be my favourite to get a podium this season, just by looking at that Aston Martin car. We know what he did with the Alpine last year. He was putting that in places where it shouldn't belong. And I think he's going to do the exact same with that Aston Martin, which looks a lot faster. And I hope that car is close to the front 3, or at least somewhat, so he could have a chance at getting another podium in Formula 1. Now, we are on to the Big 6. This is what you guys have been waiting for. But before we do it, no, I don't have a sponsor. I'm not big enough for that. We are going to look at the constructor standings instead. Now, you can probably already gather where most of them are going to be just based off of the standings that I've done. But we're going to start at P10. I'll go through it quickly. Then we'll get into the top 3 teams and the top 6 drivers. In P10, Williams. I mean, it's obvious based on my standings. I've got to go Williams. I just don't think their car is going to be fast enough. They're going to be dead last for me. I think they'll pick up points here and there, but I don't see him getting out of 10th place. In P9, I have AlphaTauri. It doesn't look like they've made much progress since last season. It's the same bottom 2 as last season as well, so maybe a safe guess. But I think it's a good prediction. It's probably what's going to happen. So I've got AlphaTauri P9. Next up, we have Haas. I have Haas finishing in P8. I think it'll be another decent year, at least up in the P8. You know, they're at the bottom ends of the midfields now. Nothing like that 2021 season. They've kind of got out of that rut. They're getting up the grid. I think with 2 experienced drivers, Nico Hülkenberg and Kevin Magnussen, they're going to score good points. They're going to have good races here and there. But I think it's going to be nothing more than a few points in certain Grand Prix weekends that I see them finishing P8 with the car that they've got. P7. Now, for P7, I think it's going to be pretty close between P7 and P6. But for P7, I've gone for Alfa Romeo. I can see Haas actually beating Alfa Romeo this season. Maybe if they have a better car, Hulkenberg with the consistency, Magnussen scoring good points. But I think Alfa Romeo are going to have enough to beat Haas, and they're going to finish P7. A little bit of a step backwards from what they did last season. They finished P6, just ahead of Aston Martin. But I think Alfa Romeo P7... You've got to be wondering, they've got to make steps forward before that Audi comes in. Audi probably want to take over when the team's P4, P5. That's the ideal range right there. If they're taking steps backwards, it's not going to look good for Alfa Romeo, but I have them finishing P7. And battling against Alfa Romeo, I have McLaren in P6. I don't think they're going to have a good year. I mentioned this when I was talking about the drivers. Their car does not look that good in testing. Yes, it's just testing. Maybe they were sandbagging. Maybe it's just a track. I don't think they're going to be that good, especially in the first half of the year. I think they'll get upgrades in, they'll develop, and they'll do enough to get P6. But I think they will struggle. So I have McLaren down in P6, which will be a very, very disappointing season. You know, they will be expecting to fight for podiums on a consistent basis. I see them finishing P6. I could be dead wrong by the end of the season. Maybe they have something they're hiding, but I see McLaren in P6. P5, Alpine. Alpine finishing P5, and I've got Aston Martin in P4. It's just Aston Martin look really good. I think they've done a great job in the off-season. Their car looks good in testing. I see them outperforming most of the midfield or most weekends. I see them beating Alpine. I see them getting P4 pretty comfortably. Aston Martin. I see Alpine 5th with Gasly and Ocon. That's a good driver pairing. I think Ocon's going to do a little better, as I mentioned on the driver's standings. But so I think Alpine P5, Aston Martin P4, and that's going to be where the midfield is. Now, on to the top 6. This is where it took me a while to decide, because it could go any way. Right now, going into Bahrain next week, it looks like Red Bull's the fastest, Ferrari 2nd, and Mercedes 3rd. But you got to remember, it's a 23-race season. Ferrari's always had struggles developing throughout a season for some reason. Mercedes, I think they're going to be really good developing, and they're going to get a lot faster. And Red Bull, they just look unbeatable. So for me, it is difficult to determine where I think the 6 drivers and the 3 teams are going to end up. But we're going to start with P6. This might give you a hint of where I think the teams are going to end up. P6, Carlos Sainz. Sainz last season had a decent season. At the start, it was horrible. He was spinning off, especially in Australia, going into gravel traps. Had a bit of bad luck at times with Daniel Ricciardo and someone else as well. But Sainz, he's a good driver. He's a solid driver. And you've got to remember, he beat Charles Leclerc in his first season in Ferrari. So he's not a bad driver by any stretch of the imagination. He had a good season last year. But I don't think that Ferrari is going to be good enough to propel him higher than P6. So I think he's going to finish P6. I think the Ferrari will be decent the first half of the season. But I think towards the second half, Mercedes development will pick up. They'll get that car going, and I could see Mercedes getting ahead of Ferrari. So P6 for Carlos Sainz. Next up in P5, Sergio Perez. Now, you've got a Red Bull driver in P5. You're probably like, do I think Mercedes is going to be the fastest? I mean, you'll find out in a couple minutes. But I think Perez P5, I think he's going to have a poor season. I think he's going to feel the pressure. Verstappen last year, what was it, 15, 16 wins, unbeatable, incredible season from Verstappen. Perez only got a couple of wins last year in what was the fastest car pretty much the whole year, except for maybe a few races when Ferrari had them. But other than that, that Red Bull was the fastest car. He couldn't come anywhere near Verstappen. And I think this season, those top 3 teams are going to be a lot closer. And when they're closer, you're going to see Perez fall behind the Mercedes, fall behind the Ferraris. I think he's going to finish P5. You get a closer top 3, Perez is not going to be the best of them. You're coming up against world-class drivers, George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc, Verstappen, Carlos Sainz. For me, Perez is at the bottom of those 6, but I think that Red Bull will just be fast enough to get him ahead of Carlos Sainz. So I've got him P5. I don't see him doing much better than that. I love Perez, but unfortunately, I think he's going to finish 5th in the championship. Now, into P4, I'm going to go with the other driver, Charles Leclerc. And that means I think Ferrari are going to finish P3 on the constructors' standings. And I think Ferrari, like I was saying, they're going to start decent, but they're going to fade away and Mercedes will overtake them. And that's why I've got Charles Leclerc down in P4. He is a world-class driver. I think he is a potential Formula 1 world champion. He's got to have the car to do it. But I do think he can become a world champion, but not this year. I think he's going to finish P4 outside the top 3. He's going to be left frustrated because Mercedes have made those developments. Red Bull and Verstappen are going to be too good as a pairing. So I've got Charles Leclerc down in P4. In P3 and 3rd in the driver's standings, I see George Russell. I think he had a phenomenal season last year in the car that he was in. Mercedes were clearly 3rd best. And even at the start of the season, they were hovering around 4th best. But 3rd best, and I think for the first however many races it was, he was called Mr. Consistent because he was finishing top 5 every single race, which was quite a feat up until that crash in Silverstone. He did have a couple incidents here and there, like Silverstone. I think he had contact with Mick Schumacher in Singapore. There was, what was it, in USA as well. He made contact with Sainz. But I think it was only like 3-4 races he had a crash. But other than that, it was a very, very strong season. And he outscored Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion. You could say, yes, Lewis was testing the car in the first 6-7 races, which is fair enough. He was doing his own setup. But he still beat Hamilton over the course of the season. Did he have better pace than Hamilton? I don't think so. But he was very, very consistent. And someone as consistent as that is a future world champion. And I think George Russell will finish P3 ahead of both Ferraris and Perez this season. Now, the last 2 drivers I haven't mentioned is Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. Do I think it's going to be a close battle for the 2023 championship? Not really. I think Verstappen is going to run away with it and take 1st place. Hamilton in P2. Now, I think Mercedes are going to have a decent car. They're going to be fighting Ferrari a lot. I think Red Bull are just going to be a little bit too fast for Mercedes and Ferrari. Mercedes will pick up wins here and there. Same with Ferrari potentially. Well, I hope so. I hope all 3 teams are winning races. But I think Mercedes are going to have Ferrari. But I think Red Bull and Verstappen as a pairing is going to be too quick for Hamilton and Mercedes. And I see Max Verstappen getting his 3rd world championship in a row. And maybe he's coming for Lewis Hamilton's 7th. But Hamilton will finish runner-up. I think Red Bull will have enough as well to win the constructors' standings and take that from Mercedes. So I think it'll be another Red Bull double. Verstappen, who had an unbelievable season last year, he won't win as many races. I think it'll be a little bit closer, but I still think he'll wrap up that title with a couple races to go and get his 3rd championship. Hamilton, on the other hand, I think he'll win a few races this season. I don't see him getting that 8th title as of just yet. Let me know in the comments what you think of my predictions. Do you agree with them? Do you disagree with some of them? What do you think is going to happen in the 2023 season? And at the end of the season, we'll come back to this and we'll see how wrong I am, because I'm probably going to be completely wrong. We'll probably see Guan Yu Zhou as a 2023 world champion, and I'll be laughing at myself. But anyway, if you did enjoy this video, make sure you go leave a like, make sure you subscribe. And the F1 Sidemen Grand Prix is coming out this Saturday, March the 4th. Make sure you're there. I'll see you guys later. Peace.